What started out as a TV show in the 80s for Georgia Championship Wrestling turned into the greatest competition the World Wrestling Federation Entertainment has ever seen. Vince McMahon's worst nightmare came to light, headed by Eric Bischoff and the Monday Night Wars, and we are here for the history of WCW. What's your greatest memory of WCW?
Ooh, gosh. Well,
because you were a wrestling fan later on in life.
I was very young. I didn't start really watching wrestling
till WWE had already stomped them out.
Till WrestleMania 20.
Yeah.
And the Royal Rumble leading up to it. But I'll never forget having the video game on N64. That was amazing. And being from Atlanta.
It's in your blood.
I remember just early memories of like Booker T and Stevie Ray, Goldberg, Sting.
Harlem Heat was fantastic.
Like Bash at the Beach.
Great pay-per-view.
Ready to Rumble.
Time.
Like,
oh man,
like these are the things when I think of WCW. Diamond Dallas Page. I think of I think of Eric Bischoff, obviously.
Think of Big Goldie.
Think of Big Goldie. But you really just think about, and you know who I really think about? Juventud Guerrero.
Right. I think of the Cruiserweight division.
I think of Juventud Guerrero.
All of those great superstars they built up that nobody else in the world would have given a chance to.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some of the best matches. I'm going back and rewatching it. I started the day Scott Hall showed up. And I've been watching it since then.
Of WCW.
Of WCW.
What I need to do that. What episode
is that? It's fantastic. It's in like we'll get into it.
Yeah, I mean when I think of WCW and what it meant for its time, it definitely felt like it was the playground of dream matches because
they were pulling those guys from WWE
and then pairing them together, and people that had never been in WWE. Again, you got to see matches that WWE would say those guys are past their prime.
Yeah.
WCW saw it as, oh no, they're just getting started. I mean, WCW, I think, was the really beginning of wrestlers realizing we can do this well into our 60s.
WWE tried to end Macho Man way before he was ready to go.
Right.
Tried to turn him into a commentator. I remember my favorite.
Tried to end Hogan.
Yeah.
Hogan went another... Gosh, when did he finally have his last match?
So Hulkamania did go back to WCW, but instead of just beating it in our face like McMahon would have done for another 10 years, WCW switched gears. So, I mean, we all know what happened there. But underrated WCW guy that I think of a lot, Raven.
Yeah.
Loved his flock in WCW. Yeah. David Flair, that whole storyline was, so good. All right, started off as a TV show for Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1982 for Jim Crockett Promotions. It would be known as WCW until 88. Like, it was such a popular TV show, people often referred to Jim Crockett Promotions as World Championship Wrestling or WCW because that was their show on Saturday nights that everyone tuned into.
I mean, if you listen to a lot of wrestlers' interviews, they talk about it was watching that show with their families that made them want to become WWE superstars.
Yeah. In 1988, they really pushed the NWA. The belts were NWA. The all of the pageantry was NWA. So they really pushed. Well, this is the NWA. This is the TV show, but we're the NWA.
And did that have to do with the brand recognition that the NWA had garnered over the years?
I think that they had so many different names out there from what I was reading that they were like, we got to hammer this down. And I do think that the NWA was kind of all over the territories because it was a bunch of territories coming together, right? Mm-hmm. And acknowledging one champion and booking it that way, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it was more of a we're getting on board with them type thing. You know, like WCW is our show, but we're getting on board. We're going to talk to that. We're going to deal with their wrestlers, their champions, their bookers, the board of trust, all that stuff. So, sold to Ted Turner, November 2nd, 1988.
Shout out to Ted Turner, former owner of the Braves.
Yeah, my guy.
CNN.
The good days of the Braves, too.
Yeah.
Oh. They stayed with the NWA with that. When Ted Turner bought it, they're like, we're already in this wrestling alliance. Let's roll with it. We got their wrestlers, their bookers, their champions. We're all in it together. We can, once a heel's done here, he can go over there, and then we can get one of their baby faces, vice versa. But in 1993, a dispute between WCW's board of directors and the NWA board of directors on who should be the champion and how they should go about title changes. Because this is when every territory is like, no, I want my guy, the NWA champion. Well, WCW's like, we're not playing your games anymore. So they split off, branded their own thing starting in 1993. They went with what people knew them as, World Championship Wrestling. February of 1993, enter one Eric Bischoff.
Legend.
He was first the executive producer. By 94, he's vice president and has full creative and financial decisions at this point.
Do we know where he came from? Was he doing wrestling stuff
He was a
before?
commentator. He was a commentator that they thought had a brain for this. I don't know if he had a marketing background, like what his background was, but he had started wrestling commentating. And that's why when he was this big shot in WCW, he still was a commentator. So that's the best part.
I mean, he's got a
When
great
I first
voice.
started watching wrestling, I thought Vince McMahon was a wrestling commentator.
Right.
I thought Jack Tunney was the ruler of WWE.
Right.
After some convincing, Eric really got Ted on board to really compete with WWF. Ted was like, we're good being number 2. Eric's like, no, we can be number 1. He's like, in order to do so, we have to have a weekly flagship show. That would turn into Nitro. Now, one would say your biggest competitor's big show's on Monday night, so you can pick any other night than Monday. Eric Bischoff said, no, we're going to compete with them. They tape on Sunday nights. We're going to go live on Monday night in their time slot, head to head.
Ballsy. Especially when WWF at the time, juggernaut.
WrestleMania was a success. They were coming off the late 80s, early 90s. Just everyone loved the Federation. Mm-hmm. And little Eric Bischoff's like, no. They landed on Monday nights head-to-head with Raw. The Monday Night Wars begun. That prompted Bischoff to really open Ted's wallet, bring in that good talent. First, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Macho Man. He was the first one to give us Hogan Flair. And he did it on television, not on a pay-per-view.
Yep. Massive.
He's like, y'all want it? All right, cool. This also drove him to build up the cruiserweight division and the mid-card. He brought in talent from all over the world, Japan, Mexico, Europe. He's like, come on, we're going to compete. So he brought in all the luchadors. He brought in the great Japanese wrestlers. He brought in Alex Wright and William Regal and Dave Taylor, Europe's finest. Mm-hmm. So really opened my eyes to like people all over the world love pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Which, because you think you're in such a bubble. You get picked on a little bit as a kid. You're like, oh, you like pro wrestling? Mm-hmm. You're like, the world likes pro wrestling. Mm-hmm. He made new stars: Chris Jericho, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Alex Wright, Juventud, Psychosis. People we would not know if it wasn't for Monday Nitro. He also brought in the heavy hitters. In early 93, he built around Hulkamania versus the Dungeon of Doom. Mm. Dungeon of Doom brought in Giant Gonzalez. They brought in Earthquake and called him Shark. Mm-hmm. They brought in all these old Hulk enemies, and people were like, we've seen this before. And also the Dungeon of Doom kept getting weirder and weirder with their characters, and that's when we were ready for more real things. Mm-hmm. So we didn't care about Kevin Sullivan with lightning bolts on his face.
Right.
You know, we don't care about, oh, you poisoned Hulk Hogan. Like, come on, man.
Right.
Like, no. We want a viable champion and a viable storyline. So they started balking at it a little bit. But then in June 1996, Razor Ramon transitions into Scott Hall and invades WCW, thus starting 83 consecutive weeks that Nitro beat Monday Night Raw in the Nielsen ratings.
Huge.
Didn't that Eric Bischoff's podcast, 83 weeks?
The Monday Night Wars.
This started the world-famous NWO angle with Hogan turning heel at Bash at the Beach 96. Bischoff wanted to attract that oh-so-lovely 18 to 35 male demographic. He did so by making everyone think the bad guy was cool again. Hogan finally turned heel. We thought we'd never see it. You got you got Diesel and Razor Ramon right beside you. What is going on? Bischoff wanted to connect with these younger guys, so he starts making the characters real or more real. You know, they're still professional wrestlers, but gone is the surfer Sting. Now we get a more depressed, melancholy Sting to combat what is going on to his beautiful WCW. The NWO has ruined it. What is he to do? 96, 97, banner years for WCW. They're killing it, crushing WWF. 98 started off promising. They had big plans. They added Thunder on Thursday nights, starting January 8th, 1998, as well as adding a third hour to Monday Nitro. They're like, we killed it the last 2 years. Let's go all in.
Sound familiar? Another program on Turner is currently doing something similar.
Goldberg comes out in 1998. The surprise babyface reception for DDP has all the WCW execs so happy, so hopeful. 98 is going to be a good year. Spring of 98, after not knowing what to do with the NWO after 2 years on top, they split the factions. NWO Hollywood, NWO Wolfpack. That's when I lost touch. Massive NWO fan. I had all the shirts. I got the Wolfpack Sting. Is because I was losing it at that point. This was the one they had. I got it because I was at a live event. I wish it was the white face Sting. Ooh, that sounded bad. I wish it was the original Sting. But this is what I got. But once they split up, I was a little bummed out. The Wolfpack was cool. They had the cool music. But I wish they just would have transitioned the NWO into that and not had the whole other side faction that you just hated.
Right.
All the boring NWO guys were over there.
Right.
I wish Luger would have gone over
Yeah,
there.
it
I
didn't
hated
really
that
make
Luger
sense.
was Wolfpack.
You know, and even in hindsight, looking back on that, not having watched it at the time, I could see if I was watching it, I would have lost interest.
Yeah, because now you're. I was a kid, but I still was like, all right, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
This is also when I was starting to lose interest in pro wrestling altogether.
Which happens.
Yeah.
You get into it as a kid.
I was 14.
Then
you
you
know,
start
I was in high school. You know,
messing around, doing
I wanted to ride bikes.
Up to hijinks.
Yeah, man, I didn't want to be in front of a TV. Plus, I was getting out of action figures, and that was my favorite thing, is to sit down on the Monday Night Wars and with my action figures and turn it back and forth between WCW and WWE. And I had them all, so I could intertwine the two. To me, it was all one big thing.
Yeah.
I had DX versus NWO.
That's the best.
It was great. Bischoff himself admits they ran out of NWO ideas. They're like, we didn't know what to do, so we split them up. What's better than one faction? Two faction. This also, unfortunately, is the time the Attitude Era starts in WWF. Ratings go through the roof. They learned what they could from taking it on the chin from WCW the last 2 years. They make their wrestlers more real, and then some, you know. So, November 1998, Kevin Nash is now the head booker. He not only ends Goldberg's streak, but he books himself as the man to do it. So he's the champ. Thus we get the finger poke of doom. Hogan hits him. He drops. NWO's united. No one cares at this point. No one's like, you gave us 2 NWOs. You can't give us one again. We're not buying it. And then they thought it was going to be clever Kevin Nash, the NWO got one over on us again, but the fans hated it. Mm-hmm. So now you got this cool thing that people loved, and it saved your company. But you beat it into the ground, and now people resent you for it. So Bischoff didn't know what to do at that point. Fired September 1999. So they go from the end of 98 to September, just lost, not knowing what to do. Kevin Nash, Hogan running wild because they're booking things. Hogan's got creative control in his contract. They're doing whatever they want. So Bischoff finally is like, but the problem with Eric Bischoff leaving is who they replace him with. And that is one Vince Russo. So in comes Vince Russo. He wants to make the product edgier. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Turner is no longer around. WCW is owned by AOL and Time Warner. They don't want to go edgier. They don't want an Attitude Era. They don't want to be in the pro wrestling business anyway. Mm-hmm. So Vince Russo and his staff is immediately suspended. And we will let Viceland take it from there on the Who Killed WCW, because it gets pretty dark pretty quick. Yeah. 2000 is not a good year for WCW. There are plenty of documentaries out there, plenty of videos out there. Please go watch some of those. Who knows? One day we'll dig into it ourselves here.
Totally.
But we want Viceland to have their time. We don't want to step on theirs. Yeah. You know what I mean? So. But yeah, anything to add to WCW?
Man, go watch Ready to Rumble.
Love that movie.
And just watch a few classic episodes, because really some great matches, great production when they were in their prime. Really awesome wrestling show.
I love that as soon as they debuted the NWO, they had a residency at Universal Studios.
Yeah.
So our first couple of weeks of the NWO just running rampant through the entire locker room is Disneyland.
It was amazing. It was amazing. But no, I can't wait to watch this documentary. Shout out to The Rock for making us more wrestling and combat sports content.
Wipe them completely from history. Tolerate them. Love them. Russo, Bischoff,
Vince Russo,
Crockett.
Erase.
Yes.
Bischoff, tolerate. No. Nah, Bischoff. Bischoff, you gotta love it. And Crockett will say tolerate.
Because of his fantastic work on Dark Side of the Ring, I will tolerate Crockett.
Yeah.
Hate that dude otherwise. Yeah. But hate Vince Russo way more. Everything that dude touched turned to just garbage.
Yeah.
So
he
talk about a cancer in the wrestling.
And you can't tell how honest he's being in interviews.
You can't tell how any of those guys, how honest any of those guys are being. And to be honest with you, I think Crockett believes his own BS.
Yeah.
Like, Crockett could be lying to your face, but he's convinced himself what he's saying is true.
That's true. That's true.
The same with Bischoff, too, to be honest with you. A buddy of mine has interviewed Bischoff on his podcast, said he was the nicest human being.
Yeah,
so
Bischoff seems cool.
You got to give Bischoff the
And Bischoff had a good run on Raw.
I liked him as
When
a
I
GM.
started watching Raw, he was the GM.
I missed those years, but I've gone back and
Him
watched
and
them.
Stone Cold were going at it. It was great.
Yeah. See, all that came back.
Yeah, it was all
in
great.
the 2000s. They eventually all came back.
Yeah.
Don't like what they did with DDP.
No, not in his WWE run.
But other than that, maybe Big Papa Pump.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's a good thing. Well, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Check out Evan Burke on YouTube. Check out Drew Harrison on YouTube. We both got specials out on the platforms. We got some clips for you to check out, too. If you're a big fan of pro wrestling, go back. Check out the clips we're putting out there. See if you agree. Let us know in those comments. Let us know what you want us to cover next. We'll see you next time.